Welcome to Powered by Ancestry. I'm your guide and host, Kwesi Kunadu. On this episode, we will target a question left by one of our subscribers. How do Blacks in the diaspora who don't know their ethnic group or culture group in Africa follow a tradition? Now, by tradition, the person means a spiritual culture, as I call it, that is Africa-based, and that in some cases made the transatlantic voyage and therefore came to the Americas, and in a few cases have existed since that point. That question is, of course, can be seen as a difficult question, because really do I like to tell others essentially what to choose or what to believe and what not to believe. That's really your choice. But I will say this to that question, because the question is two-part. So the first part of the question, for those who have a vague or no idea about which culture group for which they belong, don't worry, because you're probably in the numerical majority of folks who watch our videos. For you all, then that question becomes much more entangled. I suggest before you ask that question, meaning which spiritual cultural tradition to adhere to, do the family history worksheet first. There's an episode that I have uploaded on the Powered by Ancestry page that focuses on doing family history. Go through that worksheet, go through that work first. And here's why. That worksheet will guide you through whom your ancestors were and are, what challenges and gifts and benefits did they leave for you, and how to resolve the challenges which they have encountered and perhaps contributed to, for which you have been born into. That process would then allow you to essentially figure out who you are and to whom you belong in terms of cultural grouping. Now, it's not a straightforward process. I do offer help for people who want to know more about their ancestry in terms of African origin. But it's not an easy or straightforward process. It's not, for the reasons that I mentioned in the episode on the family history worksheet. Be that as it may, for those of you who fall into this category where they have not done that worksheet, they've not done the work yet, then we have to do some of that work first. And here's why, to the second part of the question. We can't choose or adopt or follow a cultural and spiritual tradition or spiritual culture without having a sense about whose culture are we adopting, whose tradition are we adopting, and does that adoption match the DNA of who you and your people are? In other words, there has to be some synergy between you, the adoptee, and the tradition in which you seek to adopt. So for instance, I have friends and colleagues and others who have adopted the Yoruba spiritual culture, that is the spirituality of the Yoruba people, as taught in the United States, of course in Cuba and other parts of the Americas. Doing so, just simply on your own or on its own, is not a good or bad thing, but doing so can open up some conflicts. Meaning, let's say your people, neither side of your family, your mother's lineage and your father's lineage, are not Yoruba, right? Does that mean you can't practice the spirituality of Yoruba? Of course you may do so, but you have to be aware that engaging in the spiritual practice of a people that is not yours, that may create certain spiritual and certainly physical sorts of tensions or even problems in your life that you are not expecting. And so that's one thing to consider. Second thing to consider is the layers of rituals, obligations that you be responsible for as a participant, right, in that spiritual cultural tradition. And third consideration is, does that cultural tradition speak to my spirit, my soul? If it doesn't, and it's simply something you're doing because it's quote unquote African or it's quote unquote part of a culture group that I like, right? Then you may find yourself entrapped into a spiritual cultural system that becomes pretty much dogmatic. And that doesn't necessarily resonate with your ancestry, nor with you as a person with a purpose. And that's why I circle back to do the family history worksheet first. Figure out what are the tendencies, what are the shapes, what are the forms in which your ancestors have come and gone. And then you can do some tracing, some backward tracing. And if you get stuck in the US, for instance, you can trace by other means. There are rituals that I've shared with you in other episodes that you can use to invite your ancestors to come and show you which tradition fit them and therefore you. Which one is appropriate for you in this lifetime, for you and your family and those for whom you love and care about. The question is not simply which tradition I should follow. The question is which should come first. And the first thing we should do is do the family history research and work guided by the family history worksheet that I have provided you all in the previous episode. And if you need a copy, a hard copy, or at least a digital copy, you can email me and I can send you one. But the family history worksheet will be the beginning. You have to know who you are within the broad constellation of your family in order to figure out what you're going to do in terms of spirituality. So who comes first, then the what. Not the what, then you figure out who. The other part of this question, in terms of following or adopting, is that once you do the family history research and the family worksheet, then you'll be able to have a clearer sense about your ancestry. And once that clarity is there, then you can ask them about which group do you belong. And then the research you may do about that cultural group will then serve as a basis for learning more about the spiritual culture and the broader culture of those peoples, including the language, so that you can be an exceptional practitioner of that spiritual culture tradition before adoption. So who you are, then what tradition will be answered from that process. And once you begin to practice that tradition, it will pay dividends because, for one, it will draw near others of your ancestry that will come close and that will provide you with the tools and guidance and the support that you may need on this side of things. So let's recap very quickly. The key to remember is that we have to first know who we are before we can adopt what we think we need. Second takeaway, once you have invested the time and resources into studying that cultural group and its spiritual culture, then you will be that much more effective as a participant, as a worker within a tradition that you have adopted, or better yet, that you have simply reclaimed. Because there's some people who hold that people of African ancestry can only simply borrow or adopt something that is quote unquote African. And what they fail to realize is that that thing that is African is born into you. You just have to clarify it. And that's where the family history comes in. Whom you are related to and linked to, and whom are the ones that have paved the way for you, will be the ones to clarify and to set you straight in terms of tradition or spiritual culture that you can utilize as a part of your daily living. I hope the rituals that I've shared so far in previous episodes have also been helpful. You may try those too, especially when it comes to contacting and making connections to your ancestry. And in doing those rituals, you'll have all the tools to figure out the who question as to who you are. And once you know who you are, then the traditions and spiritual culture that is embedded in who you are will become that much more clearer. And therefore, it will not be adoption. It will simply be reclaiming. It will be birthright. For Powered by Ancestry, I've been your guide and host, Kwesi Kunadu. Please drop your questions, comments, and thoughts for other episodes in the comment section below. Until next time, stay well.